a or in leadership, is empathy in leadership a learned behavior, a trained behavior, or is it something that just you have to have naturally?
That's a great question. Yes and yes.
Okay.
So first of all, obviously some people, because of the personalities, their upbringing, their experiences, their first relationships reporting to other people, um, they are more empathetic, right? And I can think of leaders that I know that are just hugely empathetic people, right? And empathy can also be learned. In fact, one of the most exciting tools I've ever created was a tool to help this physician leader become more empathetic. And then I tried it out with different leaders, and I had one leader tell me when the first time that we met, we were looking at his development plan, and I said, my guess is that your wife says that you don't listen well. And he said, my wife tells me I have no empathy. And I said, well, by the time we're done, your wife is going to be thanking us both. And then fast forward, we were finishing up, and he spontaneously, during a coaching session over lunch, we were sort of having lunch as we were finishing, he said, oh, by the way, my wife gave me some spontaneous feedback. And yes, like, wow, you're really showing up differently. You're listening better. You're more empathetic. And, what I say is that, who you are is who you are, no matter what environment you're in. And so, I caution people that your journey to become a better leader is going to spill over, and you're going to be a better man or woman, and you're going to be a better spouse and a better parent. The tool real quick that I gave him was, if you want, I could actually just share with you the tool. Like, if we take nothing else from this interaction, it could be
Sure.
that.
Why don't we do that? Because like I agree with your point that there's life. There's not work life and personal life. There's life. What affects this side affects that side, vice versa. They cross over. So when you acquire a skill, develop a skill, nurture a skill like empathy, then that will carry over into all aspects of your life. And my experience has been, it just makes you much more approachable, much happier, and a better person.
Yes.
So what is that? Let's talk about the tool.
Okay. So this is, again, built on the premise that people can be taught to be more empathetic. And one other thing I want to say before I talk about the tool is, you just have to realize, like, that some of us are more naturally left brain, like analytical, scientific, logical, rational. And I like to say, like, when your left brain is this big, your right brain can only be so big. And the right brain is where you have empathy, relationships, things like that. And so all we're doing is we're actually helping people basically get neurotransmitters firing in the right side of the brain, right? Access that brain. So there's some sort of neuroscience behind it. So here it is. So I'm going to do it with you, just to play, right? So the next time, I want you to pick someone. It can either be your wife, it can be somebody on your team, it could be the CEO that you're reporting to in this the startup. Give me somebody that you would like to demonstrate greater empathy towards. I just need a first name or relationship.
Okay, it would be somebody that's on the let's say it's a team member, and we'll call him Bob.
Okay, Bob. And so Bob reports to you.
Yes.
Okay. And just, it could be hypothetical or actual. When is the next time you're going to have a conversation with Bob?
Let's say it's tomorrow.
Okay, good. So there's two parts of this piece, this step. The first part, I want you to do this for about 3 months. And then I'm going to tell you what the second part is. Okay. The first part is tomorrow. Let's say your call's at 1:00. Before you have that conversation with Bob, I want you to pause and ask yourself, how do I want Bob to feel during and as a result of our interaction? Right? So while we're having a conversation, and then after the conversation, and he sort of like walking away and has an experience of our interaction, how do I, Raj, want him to feel? Now, that seems so silly and subtle, but what it does, first of all, it puts a wedge between your automatic way of interacting, and it sets an intention for him to have a purposeful experience. It reminds you that the way that you interact with Bob is going to connect him to a particular feeling. He is going to feel a certain way. And it also helps you recognize that you actually can influence how he feels as a result of your interaction. And obviously, if he feels good, then he is more likely to, bottom line, do what you want him to do, right? Your ability to influence people is higher if they feel good as a part of your interaction, right?
I like the way you phrase that, is how you want them to feel, not what you want them to do, not what you want them to think, not what
Correct.
your actions are. It is how you want them to feel. So I would want them to feel energized, motivated, inspired, ready to go, empowered, ready to tackle the next thing, because that helps them rise to their level of leadership where they need to be to grow professionally and personally. And so, so knowing that as the metric to measure, I guess, the next steps,
Yes.
you actually approach the conversation differently. Where
Yeah.
else would you take this?
Yes, exactly. I mean, you just basically said, so I need to throw, if you're ever grappling right before the conversation with, do I give him the laundry list of how he's messing up? Right? You just said, throw that out, because you know that's not going to motivate, develop, inspire, that kind of thing, right? And then during the interaction, occasionally as it shows up in your mind, remind yourself, how do I want him to feel in this interaction? So you get to do these real-time resets, right? It's very powerful to like keep in focus the fact that the way that you interact with someone has an impact. And Bob won't remember exactly what you said or whatever, but he will remember how he felt.
How he felt, absolutely.
And that's your
Yeah.
long-term sustainable way of motivating and inspiring Bob.
So if you had to encapsulate everything into one generalized statement, focus on how you want your the person you're interacting with to feel after your conversation, not what you want them to do as a result of it.
Yeah. A soundbite would be to be intentional in the way that you interact with the other person based on how you want them to feel during and as a result of that interaction. Now that's for the first 3 months. Then after you get really good at that, and by the way, my sort of left brain geeky clients, right? I say geeky, myself included a little bit. They're good at that, right? Because like it's very sort of problem specific, right? Like, how do I, I can access me as a center, and then how do I want them to feel, right? In order to produce a particular result. It's a very
right. In my experience, leaders are that way. Okay, what do I need to do? This is something I can do.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. So now you get good at that. And then so in 3 months, I want you to make one little shift. And the shift is before and during your conversation, you ask yourself, how does Bob want to feel during and as a result of our interaction?
Now, how would you know that? How would you know what he wants to feel?
Well, think about Bob and think about your conversation tomorrow. We can start by process of elimination. Does he want to feel angry, frustrated, confused, disconnected?
Anybody who intentionally wants to feel that way, so we could probably take those off the table.
Exactly. That's a whole nother ballgame.
Yeah.
Right. So you have a pretty good idea that, even just in the big buck of it, he wants to feel good. Right? You could guess that that's how he wants to feel. But you could also ask him, but you don't need to really do that, right?
One technique that I've used and has worked for me is I ask people what they want as an additional skill set in 12 months. So if we were having a conversation at lunch 12 months from today, and we said, wow, you really did well accomplishing that. You learned this new skill. What would that skill be? And then we sort of retroactively plan for what that means to acquire the skill. So could it be certification classes, online training, whatever it is, and then we backtrack that and say, all right, I'm going to check in with you in 3 months, or maybe it needs to be less than that, and see how it's going. Because I've found that when that is a motivation to help somebody improve themselves, especially professionally, which unfortunately there's not a lot of that goes around. A lot of people are like, I'm hiring you for this like role. You need to like step up and do the role. Whereas we don't always pay attention to what does that mean? Oh, do you want to get certified? Do you want to get, an additional roster of extra activities under your belt? Do you want to start leading teams? What does that mean to lead teams? I'll give you an example. I had one person who interviewed with me. He was not managing any teams, but he would only come to our company if he would manage a team. And I said, well, can you help connect the dots for me here? Because if you're not managing a team, but you're open to leaving and maybe working for us, but you want to lead a team, what have you done to prepare yourself to
Right.
lead a team? Have you read books? Have you taken like any kind of like classes or something like that? And none of that had happened. It was more of a sense of entitlement that, well, I'm now senior in my career. I need to be managing people. I'm not getting to manage people where I currently am. So I'm going to move someplace where I can. But there is no next step that he had taken.
Yeah.
And so I think it's really important to take that.
Yes. So yeah, and I'm aware you do that, and it's a great skill. And a lot of good companies have developmental, goals as well as business goals, and that's one of the reasons that you're really good at developing and inspiring teams is because you're very intentional with what they want to develop. You ask them like, what do you want to develop? How can I help you? You put together a plan and you check in on a regular basis. Developing empathy is different, right? Because it's about you changing your behavior, right? Yes, while you're helping them develop a certain skill set, whether it's knowledge or skills or competencies, whatever, right? But I just want to put a period on what I was saying about the empathy thing. When you ask yourself, how does Bob want to feel during and as a result of my interaction? That, my friend, is the very definition of empathy. Putting yourself in someone else's shoes, being able to feel how they feel. So just by it's a neuroscience thing. Just by asking yourself the question, something that left brain people have, like all of us have access to do. It's a cognitive piece. You're asking a question. You actually use your cognitive ability to access an affective part of your brain. And in the process of doing that, continually connecting those two pieces, something that you're good at naturally and something you're learning, you over time, like my client, develop empathy.
It's interesting the way you answered that latter part because, in leadership, I gravitate toward actionable items. And I sort of just did,
Yes.
right? It's like, this
Yeah.
is what I would do. This is the next steps that I would take. And it works. And, I like to think that I'm empathetic, but I'm sure there's always skills that I can continue to develop. But I like the fact that you have to be very intentional, very conscious about thinking about feelings as opposed to just the next action. So that's a really important
Yes.
step.
And particularly right now, right, where people's capacity, after 2020 is it's on borrowed fuel. And I can tell you, like a lot of the organizations I'm working with, like they are stepping up their mental health game because they know if they're not recognizing and how if they're not doing it themselves, outsourcing ways for their employees and managers and leaders to take care of their own mental health, then minimally productivity is going to go down, right? And I mean, people are really struggling. So yeah, so it's not just what we do, but how we do it. It's not just what we say, but how we say it.
Very good, Jeff.
Yes.
Thanks.
All right, thank you. Hang with me.